the British monarchy is quietly preparing something no one expected: a royal estate transformed into a luxury destination where weddings, global events, and community gatherings will take place side by side, not inside Buckingham Palace, not behind the closed gates in London, but on a historic estate in Scotland that was nearly lost forever. This isn't just a renovation. According to publicly shared plans, it's a long-term vision tied to King Charles's personal philosophy, one that blends heritage, sustainability, and economic renewal in a way rarely seen at this level. And what makes this project especially intriguing is why now, and what it reveals about the future direction of the monarchy itself. The announcement came quietly, but the implications are significant. On January 6th, the King's Foundation unveiled plans for an $8.7 million expansion at Dumfries House, a 300-year-old estate located in East Ayrshire, Scotland. The project will introduce a brand new events venue known as the King's Hall, designed to host up to 200 guests for weddings, private events, and large-scale cultural gatherings. At first glance, this might sound like a standard upgrade, but Dumfries House is anything but ordinary. The estate sits on more than 2,000 acres of land and holds deep architectural and historical value, originally designed by renowned architect Robert Adam. More importantly, it represents one of King Charles's most personal and hands-on initiatives long before he ascended the throne. Back in 2007, when Dumfries House faced an uncertain future, the then Prince of Wales stepped in to help save it. According to publicly available information, his goal wasn't simply preservation, it was transformation. He envisioned a living estate, one that could serve as a visitor destination, a learning center, and a driver of long-term social and economic regeneration for the surrounding region. Fast forward nearly 2 decades, and that vision is now entering a new phase. The King's Hall will be built as a single-story extension to the east wing of Dumfries House, replacing an older pavilion that had been used as an event space for over 10 years. The new structure will span approximately 4,628 square feet, with more than 3,000 square feet dedicated to a public hall designed for high-end experiences. But here's where the story becomes more interesting. According to statements from the King's Foundation, demand for events at Dumfries House has steadily increased, particularly for 5-star occasions. The existing facilities reportedly limited the estate to hosting just 1 or 2 major events per week. The new hall changes that entirely. With expanded space and upgraded infrastructure, the Foundation expects to host 5 or 6 large-scale events every week, opening the door to a national and international audience. This raises an important question. Why would a reigning monarch invest so heavily in an events venue? The answer appears to lie in how King Charles views the role of royal estates in the modern era. Rather than functioning purely as historical monuments, Dumfries House is positioned as a self-sustaining ecosystem. Revenue generated from ticketed events, weddings, and private functions will reportedly be reinvested directly into conservation efforts, estate maintenance, and, critically, education and employment programs. According to the Foundation, more than 10,000 people engage with its education and community initiatives each year. The expansion is expected to increase job opportunities in the region while supporting long-term skills training tied to sustainability, heritage crafts, and hospitality. And sustainability is not an afterthought here. Publicly released plans confirm that the new King's Hall will be heated using biomass boilers and heat pumps, aligning with King Charles's long-standing environmental advocacy. Catering at events will emphasize organic food and locally sourced produce, another hallmark of his approach to land management and food systems. In other words, this isn't just a luxury venue, it's a carefully engineered model. Evan Sampson, general manager of Dumfries House for the King's Foundation, described the goal as creating a space that offers intimacy, atmosphere, and historic grandeur, while also serving a broader social purpose. According to his statement, the ambition is for the King's Hall to become a go-to destination for high-end weddings and private events, without disconnecting from the estate's educational and community mission. Okay? And that balance between exclusivity and accessibility may be the most revealing aspect of the entire project, because it reflects a wider shift in how royal institutions are adapting to public expectations, financial realities, and long-term relevance. But this expansion also raises another layer of questions. How does opening royal land to luxury events reshape public perception? What does it mean for the local community beyond the headlines? And how does Dumfries House fit into the broader strategy of the modern monarchy? Those answers begin to emerge when we look at who benefits most from this transformation, and why Dumfries House has become a testing ground for a very different royal legacy. To understand why Dumfries House matters so much, it helps to look beyond the building plans and into the surrounding community. East Ayrshire is not typically associated with global luxury events. It's a region that, like many rural areas, has faced long-term economic challenges, limited job diversity, and declining opportunities for younger generations. When Dumfries House was first saved in 2007, many observers questioned whether a historic estate could realistically drive lasting local change. That question still lingers today, but the numbers suggest something different is happening. According to information shared by the King's Foundation, the estate has gradually evolved into a year-round operation, supporting education programs, heritage skills training, hospitality roles, and conservation work. These are not temporary positions tied to tourism seasons, but ongoing opportunities connected to the estate's daily function. The new King's Hall is designed to accelerate that model by increasing the number of large-scale events from 1 or 2 per week to potentially 5 or 6. The Foundation expects a consistent flow of activity, not just for the estate itself, but for local suppliers, farmers, craftspeople, and service providers. This is where weddings become more than weddings. Each high-end event brings caterers, florists, technicians, planners, accommodation partners, and transport services. According to the Foundation's publicly stated goals, much of this demand is intended to be met locally, reinforcing a circular economy rather than extracting value from the region. And that detail is crucial, because this project is not funded as a private royal investment. It operates through a charitable framework, one established by King Charles in 1990, with reinvestment written into its structure. Revenue from events at the King's Hall will reportedly support conservation at Dumfries House itself, while also funding education and training programs across the estate. These programs engage thousands of people annually, including students, apprentices, and adults retraining for new careers. In that sense, Dumfries House functions less like a traditional royal residence and more like a living institution, but not everyone immediately sees it that way. There is an understandable tension when luxury and public benefit intersect, especially on land associated with the monarchy. Hosting exclusive weddings at a historic estate can raise concerns about accessibility, optics, and priorities. The King's Foundation appears aware of this balance. Statements emphasize that the King's Hall will not replace community use, but expand it. In addition to private events, the space will host education programs, exhibitions, and community gatherings, integrating high-end hospitality with public-facing initiatives. And the design itself reflects that intent. Rather than altering the historic main house, the extension is positioned as a seamless addition, respecting the original Robert Adam architecture while meeting modern needs. The previous pavilion, which served as an event space for over a decade, will be replaced, not expanded beyond recognition. This approach aligns closely with King Charles's long-standing views on architecture and preservation. For decades, he has publicly advocated for development that respects local context, craftsmanship, and environmental responsibility. Dumfries House has often been cited as a practical expression of those beliefs, not just a symbolic one. Which brings us to timing. Why announce this now? At 77, King Charles is widely viewed as a monarch focused less on grand gestures and more on legacy building. Unlike some royal projects centered on ceremony, this initiative quietly reinforces themes he has championed for years: sustainability, education, and place-based regeneration. The King's Hall is scheduled to open in the summer of 2027. That long timeline suggests careful planning rather than urgency, and signals that this is meant to be a permanent fixture, not a temporary experiment. And yet, there's another layer to this story, because Dumfries House is not the only estate connected to the King's Foundation, but it is one of the most visible examples of how royal assets can be reimagined in a modern context. If successful, it may serve as a blueprint, a model where heritage sites generate their own funding, reduce reliance on public money, support local economies, and remain culturally relevant without losing their historical identity. That raises an intriguing possibility. Is Dumfries House a one-off passion project, or is it the beginning of a broader shift in how royal land and institutions operate? The answer may depend on how the public responds once the King's Hall opens its doors, and whether this blend of luxury, education, and sustainability proves sustainable itself. Because when the first wedding takes place inside the King's Hall in July 2027, it won't just mark the opening of a venue, it will test a philosophy. When Dumfries House opens the King's Hall in 2027, the event itself may feel understated, elegant, controlled, and carefully managed. But symbolically, it carries weight, because this project highlights a subtle shift in how the monarchy engages with the public, not through ceremony or spectacle, but through infrastructure, economics, and long-term planning. For much of modern history, royal estates have existed in a delicate balance. They are national symbols, historical landmarks, and working properties all at once. Maintaining them is expensive, and public expectations around transparency and value have increased steadily. The King's Foundation appears to be addressing that reality head-on. By creating revenue-generating spaces within historic estates, the Foundation reduces dependence on external funding while keeping the sites active and relevant. Importantly, this is done without selling land or privatizing heritage, a distinction often emphasized in official messaging. Dumfries House, in that sense, becomes a proof of concept. It shows how a royal estate can function as a platform rather than a monument, hosting education, employment, and cultural exchange alongside high-end hospitality. This approach also reflects King Charles's personal leadership style. Throughout his public life, he has been described as detail-oriented and deeply invested in causes rather than optics. Unlike initiatives driven by rapid visibility, this project unfolded slowly, from saving the estate in 2007 to building educational programs, to now expanding its physical capacity nearly 2 decades later. That long arc suggests intentionality, and it contrasts with a public narrative that often frames royal projects as ceremonial or symbolic. Dumfries House, by comparison, operates quietly, producing measurable outcomes without constant attention. Yet the decision to host luxury weddings is what draws headlines. Weddings carry emotional and cultural weight. They're personal, celebratory, and highly visible, especially when hosted at historic locations. Allowing them to take place on a royal estate invites the public into spaces traditionally viewed as distant or inaccessible. That accessibility, however, is carefully structured. The King's Hall does not open the private living quarters of the estate. Instead, it creates a defined space where public and private interests can intersect responsibly. Guests gain access to history and atmosphere, while the estate maintains control and purpose. This model may become increasingly important. As public scrutiny of wealth, land use, and privilege grows, institutions associated with tradition face pressure to justify their relevance. Projects like the King's Hall respond not with rhetoric, but with function. They ask a different question. How can heritage actively serve the present? According to statements from Foundation leadership, the answer lies in reinvestment. Revenue supports conservation. Conservation supports education. Education supports employment. Employment supports community stability. It's a closed loop, at least in theory. And theory is what will be tested next. Once the King's Hall becomes operational, success won't be measured solely by bookings or revenue. It will be evaluated by outcomes: job creation, educational reach, and community engagement. Gordon Neal, executive director of the King's Foundation, described the project as a testament to the impact of King Charles's involvement at Dumfries House, particularly in education and employment. That emphasis is telling, because it reframes the narrative away from luxury and toward legacy. This isn't about transforming Dumfries House into a destination for exclusivity alone. It's about ensuring that the estate continues to function financially, socially, and culturally for generations to come. And while Dumfries House is based in Scotland, its implications extend far beyond East Ayrshire. If this model proves effective, it may influence how other historic estates, royal or otherwise, approach preservation in the 21st century. Rather than relying solely on tourism or public funding, they may integrate multi-use spaces that serve diverse audiences. That would represent a significant evolution. But evolution rarely happens without scrutiny. Public response will likely remain mixed. Some will see opportunity and innovation. Others may question whether luxury events align with the spirit of public heritage. Both perspectives are valid, and both will shape how projects like this are received. What remains clear is that Dumfries House is no longer just a rescued estate. It has become a living experiment, one that blends tradition with adaptation, history with modern economics, and royal legacy with community relevance. What makes Dumfries House especially notable is that it doesn't follow the traditional royal estate model. Most historic properties rely heavily on seasonal tourism, guided tours, gift shops, and limited access experiences. Dumfries House, by contrast, has been quietly transitioning into a multifunctional hub where different audiences interact with the same space for very different reasons. On any given week, the estate may host students learning heritage crafts, community groups attending workshops, visitors exploring the grounds, and, in the near future, guests attending private celebrations. That overlap is intentional. According to publicly available information, the King's Foundation designed Dumfries House to operate year-round, reducing dependence on peak tourist seasons. The King's Hall strengthens that strategy by ensuring consistent use regardless of weather, season, or visitor cycles. This matters more than it might seem, because sustainability in this context is not only environmental, it's economic and operational. A space that sits empty most of the year cannot sustain long-term educational or employment programs. A space that hosts regular high-demand events can. And that brings us back to weddings. Luxury weddings are among the most reliable segments in the events industry. They are planned months or years in advance, less affected by economic fluctuations, and often involve multi-day stays. For a rural estate like Dumfries House, that stability translates into predictable revenue streams. According to statements from estate management, this predictability allows long-term planning, hiring staff permanently rather than seasonally, expanding training programs, and investing in conservation work without interruption. In other words, weddings are not the goal. They are the mechanism. And the King's Hall is designed specifically to support that mechanism without compromising the historic integrity of the main house. By placing the extension in the east wing and limiting it to a single story, the foundation avoids altering the visual dominance of the original structure. This preserves the architectural narrative of the estate while adding modern capacity discreetly. Architecturally, this choice reflects a philosophy King Charles has promoted for decades, that new development should respect scale, proportion, and local character rather than compete with it. This philosophy extends beyond buildings and into operations. Energy systems planned for the King's Hall, including biomass, boilers, and heat pumps, are not experimental features added for branding. They align with systems already in use across parts of the estate, reinforcing a consistent approach rather than a symbolic gesture. Catering plans follow the same logic. Organic ingredients and locally sourced produce are not framed as luxury add-ons, but as extensions of existing agricultural and supply networks connected to the estate. This reinforces relationships with regional producers while reducing logistical complexity. Every detail feeds back into the same closed-loop model. But perhaps the most under-discussed element of this project is education. The King's Foundation reports that its programs engage more than 10,000 people each year, from young students to adults retraining for new careers. These programs are embedded within the estate, meaning participants don't just study theory, they operate within a functioning environment. The expansion of event capacity increases opportunities for hands-on training in hospitality, event management, culinary services, conservation, and sustainability-focused operations. As the King's Hall moves from blueprint to reality, the true story won't be written in architectural plans or press releases. It will be written in outcomes, in the people trained, the jobs created, and the way this historic estate fits into everyday life, not as a relic, but as a working part of the present. And Dumfries House may only be the beginning. Because across the UK and beyond, Other historic properties are facing the same question: how to preserve the past without freezing it in time.